1955 when federal involvement in research got going. It isn't true anymore, and it needs to be looked at. The University of Michigan this year will do $1 billion of direct costs of research. That's a lot of research, and it puts the University of Michigan as a very select club. But the federal government is not paying its share for that relative to Johns Hopkins, Harvard, other universities with whom we compete for the federal dollar. A third issue is aligning with K through 16 education. The Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, which used to go under the euphonious acronym of NASULGIC and now goes by APLU, is examining questions of educational alignment and taking a comprehensive look at K through 16 education to see if there are possibilities for streamlining or greater efficiencies that can lead to better education and free up funds for reallocation. I think this is a promising idea, but I do have to say that for those of you who think that a three-year college degree will become common, I don't think it will happen in Ann Arbor. We have lots of students who enter as freshmen in Ann Arbor who could graduate in 3 years. They come in with tons of AP credit. They've done dual enrollment courses. They could easily get out. Some of them could get out in 2 years. They don't want to. They want to stay the full 4 years in Ann Arbor, because, of course, it is a terrific experience, but it also gives them an opportunity, if they come in with accelerated standing, to take a second major, to study abroad, to get a degree certificate. There's lots of things they can do if they stay the extra years, and believe me, they do want to stay. I've given you here some references which talk about some of the ideas that I've raised here, because some of you may want to have a look at some of these. I do think that national and state leadership is going to be required to move the nation forward in thinking about and ultimately supporting public higher education. The state of Michigan, which has a long history of leadership in higher education, is well positioned to contribute to this national debate. And I encourage those of you who have an interest in it to get engaged in the debate as well. So that completes my prepared remarks. And now I'd like to hear about your thoughts and answer your questions. Yes, sir.
The Texas university system evolved into a system over about a 100-year period, ending in 1984 when a state constitutional amendment was approved that extended the permanent university funds to all of the sub-branches of the university. Does Texas and so Texas now has 9 main campuses and 6 healthcare institutions that are part of the system. Does Texas's fairly recent experience with forming a system have anything to say to Michigan?
That's a really interesting question, and for those of you who don't know, I spent 25 years at the University of Texas, and I topped out there as provost of that system, so I'm actually really well acquainted with this. Actually, 2 of the 15 institutions are not qualified to use the permanent university fund, but you're right, the others are. In the state of Texas, there are 6 systems, and the University of Texas system is the one you mentioned. There are 5 others. And on top of that, there is a higher education coordinating board. One of the problems with the system is that it adds another bureaucratic layer, which makes it hard to get things done. So, for example, at the University of Michigan, I can typically get a new major vetted and approved within a period of 3 or 4 months. In Texas, if I worked at lightning speed, I could maybe get it done in 2 years. So that's one way that the system organization does work against you. On the other hand, it does offer a lot of benefits that are interesting. So, for example, University of Texas at Austin, not unlike the University of Michigan, gets far more applicants than it can possibly handle. And so they have a program in which you may not get admitted to Austin, but you may get admitted to the school at Arlington or at El Paso or San Antonio, and then you're given a promise. If you take a certain set of courses and you get a 3.2 average, then you're guaranteed transfer back to Austin. So that is one way of handling the political pressure of there not being enough seats at the flagship school. And so I think that's been an advantage. I think the other advantage has been that the University of Texas system has developed a great cooperative spirit among its campuses, so they collaborate on research and a number of other things. That has not happened in the other 5 systems in the state. And so my conclusion from this is it's not the system form of organization that gives you the advantages. It's the kind of leadership you have at the system that can give you the advantages. And without that leadership, you may actually be worse off because you become more bureaucratically complicated. Yes?
Hi, Brianna from Government Service. Do you have a percentage in your mind of what you'd like to see the government invest in higher ed year after year? And if so, what percentage of that would be from the federal or state government?
Well, that's a really good question. So if we talk about government investment in higher education, I think as your question suggests, it is important to distinguish federal and state levels because there is investment that goes on at both levels. And the truth is we don't account very well for how it happens. So a lot of times we forget that the federal taxpayer has actually contributed a fair amount, particularly to the research universities. I mentioned, for example, the subsidy which the tuition credits represent. I rarely see any dollar estimate of what that tuition subsidy amounts to for the federal government. So, part of it is let's be honest about the fact that there are different kinds of subsidy going on. And then I think the second question is to figure out, what is it that makes sense? What would be fair? I think it would be different for different kinds of schools. So I have suggested that if you just put the University of Michigan in terms of research dollars on a par with the private institutions with which it competes, then there would be another $500 million in indirect costs that would be coming. Do I think that's fair? Well, I think it's fair if you consider the investment we have from the state relative to our private peers. But, as to a more general issue of what percentage of operating costs should be picked up by somebody else, I'm not going to go out on that limb because I can't give you much of an answer. I could give you an estimate for what I think about the University of Michigan, and I'm rapidly forming an estimate of what I think about the University of Virginia. Well, right now we're down to about 317 or 316 million, I guess, in state appropriations right now. The most important thing for the University of Michigan would be to stabilize it. If we could stabilize it, we could plan better. And that would help us over the long run, I think, to do a better job. It's when everything fluctuates that it becomes difficult to guarantee the quality of the education. I actually believe that the University of Michigan has done a remarkably good job of doing that because long-term planning is kind of part of the culture of administration there. And so they've been looking out long-term and planning things that actually take a long time to do. And that's important to do. But it's the fluctuations that have been the most difficult to deal with. If we could guarantee that we stayed at the current 316 million, that would be a terrific first start. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's been a growing conversation around identifying opportunities for efficiencies in education, beyond just budget cuts, but trying to identify different ways to deliver the education, or as you referenced earlier, helping people to start to attain some of it in high school and finish it up at other institutions. Can you talk a little bit about what opportunities you see in that area?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say on the general area of efficiencies, we've been very alert to this in Ann Arbor. If you'll go to the Provost website off the University of Michigan homepage, we have a document there on cost containment which talks about what we have done in cutting out $135 million over the last 5 years and our current plans to cut out another $100 million within 3 years. We've been very strategic about this. We've thought carefully about our resources, and rather than cut academic programs, what we have tried to do instead is to cut in the operational areas to make them more efficient. Many of those efficiencies actually do involve applying IT to kind of routine processes to make them more efficient. But there are lots of other things that we've done dealing with things like procurement and reorganization and so on. So I'll refer you to that and you can read about them. But the question is often raised about could we not deliver the education more efficiently if we made more use of online resources. Every course in Ann Arbor right now has an online representation, and nearly every faculty member is using it because that's the standard way these days to communicate with your students. They expect it, and they actually like to be able to communicate with you 24/7. I have explained to my own students that I'm not going to answer their emails at 2 in the morning because I'm asleep. And they're not, I know, because all